thought teaching 7th and 8th grade was challenging, and it is because of their attitudes sometimes, but the creativity you need with infants, toddlers, and preschool is no one really realized. It was the most shocking experience in one way, because you realize how little control you have when you're working with toddlers. What they're doing already is amazing, and then they have to do more, and then I worry that there's no one there saying, you are doing an amazing job.
Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education. The more we learn about leadership, the more we realize that successful leadership hinges on authenticity, not authority. This holds true in early childhood education as much as any other field or industry. Leaders in early childhood education that have the most impact build communities that work towards a common goal with their team. Studies have found that this team mentality, founded on the relationships that people have with their peers and superiors, is highly correlated with teacher retention in the high turnover sector of early childhood education. Our guest, Belinda Costin, talks with us about how joining the right association can help early childhood educators find like-minded people that can act as a support system when navigating the many challenges in the role. She offers actionable steps to find and or build a community by being proactive about professional growth. Let's dive into it. Belinda, welcome to the Preschool Podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Ron.
So let's start out by learning a little bit more about you. And I always like to start off learning a little bit about how you got involved in the field of early childhood education.
All right. I received my bachelor's in elementary education, so I actually started my career teaching in 2nd grade, and then I got my master's in educational administration, and I became a principal. And I was a principal for a private school, and I also taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I really had taught 2nd through 8th grade and was in administration. But then when I moved back to Ohio, my teaching license wasn't current. So while I worked on making my license or getting my license current, I started working in an early childhood setting with toddlers. So I went from being an 7th and 8th grade teacher / principal to becoming a toddler teacher. And it was the most shocking experience in one way, because you realize how little control you have when you're working with toddlers. And you have to be so much more creative. It was such a wonderful challenge. And I wondered if I would survive. But once I got past that hump of, okay, this is the reality of toddlers, and life is different, and you are not the one who can say, I'm the principal, you need to listen to me, or I'm going to call your parents. It's very different with toddlers, and I began to appreciate and respect the brain of a toddler. And I did research about brain development from infants up to age 5, and I realized, or I should say I realized, that that's where all the learning first begins, and that is the most valuable time, is the 0 to 5. And then instead of going into elementary school, I became a director of one of the child care centers where I had been teaching. And as a director, I realized more fully that the teachers in the classroom work with the children tirelessly, and I realized I wanted to work with the teachers rather than work with administration. And I realized I wanted to do it within the 0 to 5 age group. I wanted to make a difference because, first of all, I had a deeper respect for infant, toddler, preschool, pre-K, kindergarten teachers, and I really wanted to help them so that they would love their job more if they did already, and maybe love their job if they didn't. So that's really how I never went back into elementary school or back into being a principal, how I remained in early childhood education.
Very neat. And question for you, and you talked about this a fair bit in terms of learning or relearning some of the things about brain development and the challenges and rewards of working with children age 0 to 5. But coming from grade school, sort of grade 7 and 8, what was one of the perceptions that you had of early childhood educators or the early childhood education field that you had going in that changed once you had that experience?
That's a great question. Okay, I will never forget preparing my lesson plan and going in and executing my lesson plan in a preschool classroom for my interview that would lead to my teaching the toddlers. So I had this well-written, thought-out lesson plan it was about insects. And I had printed off pictures of insects, and I had some activity, I don't remember exactly what activity it was, for the insects. And I remember in my head, I envisioned these little preschoolers were going to sit in a circle with me, quietly captivated by my story and my pictures, and were just going to sit with me, and we were all going to learn about insects together. And I quickly realized that they don't sit as long. I mean, again, I should have realized this. I should have known this, but they don't sit as long as you do, and you have to be a lot more creative with how you're going to approach a subject with children. And having a piece of paper with a two-dimensional object like an insect is not going to get their attention. So that was probably one of my big reveals. And I think the other thing that I realized was when I think I still had an idea that infants through preschool in particular was really kind of glorified babysitting.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, again, because I had forgotten about the brain research and the brain development I had learned in college, I didn't realize that there is so much going on in their brains and that there is a way to tap into it, and that it's the teacher that can make a difference in the classroom, whether it's glorified babysitting or worse, or whether it is high-quality interactions with the teacher and the children where learning and researching together is going on.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that always strikes me in doing the Preschool Podcast is that the perception of early childhood education and the reality is almost on completely polar opposites, in that generally you kind of think, okay, you're working with younger children, the subject matter is very, very basic. I'm not teaching them mathematics and reading and all this other stuff. But actually the reality is it's so much more complicated, and it's so much more dynamic to sort of
my goodness.
manage. And you can't just, teach them as you had planned to do so thoughtfully going in, and then quickly realized, wow, this is really challenging.
Yes, that is very true. I thought teaching 7th and 8th grade was challenging, and it is because of their attitudes sometimes, but the creativity you need with infants, toddlers, and preschool is no one really realizes. If you haven't been in an early childhood education classroom, you don't realize the creativity and how you're always on. Like with 7th and 8th graders, I could say, okay, everybody read that chapter and take notes, and then I could go over to my desk and maybe plan what I was going to do, whatever I had to get ready. Whereas with toddlers, you had to be on all the time. You had to always be thinking on your feet what you were going to do next. And the energy that it took, I just don't think even other teachers in the field realize it.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Work tirelessly, as you said, is very accurate description.
Yeah.
And so now you're the president of the Ohio AEYC. Can you tell us about what Ohio AEYC is and how and why you have become the president of this association?
Sure. All right. So when I got into early childhood education and realized that I wanted to stay there, I also realized that since my degree had been in elementary education and in educational administration, I need to do some deeper research into best practices for early childhood education. So I began to find out about and read a book called Developmentally Appropriate Practices. And it was a publication from an association called NAEYC, or National Association for the Education of Young Children. And as I delved into that deeper, I asked other people around me, co-workers, about NAEYC, and then they informed me that actually this national association also has state and local associations. So I wanted to get more involved in my state association because it is an association for early childhood professionals. It is for the teachers. It's not, for the owners or for the directors or for the people doing professional development. It is really geared toward the professionals. And I firmly believe that the teachers need such support in the classroom. And so I felt like if I could get more involved in the state association and I could learn more about what it is and what it does for professionals, then I can get the word out to other professionals so that they can get involved in this association and feel some support, either by coming to a conference or even going to the website. All of their publications, they have a magazine that gives teachers ideas for what they can do in the classroom regarding everything from STEM to language and literacy. And then, you get books, and all the books are research-based, and they have a variety of topics. And so I got involved at the local level in Ohio AEYC, and then gradually got on the board. And then I realized that we have some changes going on in the state and nationally regarding the association. Associations are not, the membership is declining, and so we're trying to find new ways to bring in new members to get the word out. And so I realized that I really wanted to get more involved with that. How can I get the word out? Because I believe no matter where you are, that if a teacher, especially early childhood teachers who feel sometimes isolated, could find an association or a group that they can meet other teachers who understand what they're going through, then maybe they'll more likely either stay in the field or get reinvigorated for the field. And I know that was a long answer, but that's really how I got into Ohio AEYC and why I ended up becoming president.
It sounds like some of your early experiences working with toddlers in the classroom helped inspire you to, come to this conclusion that the early childhood professionals need support because their roles are so challenging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At one point, I was an educational consultant. So I left, I was within the same company that I worked for, that I went from a toddler teacher to a director. And then I just went to them and I said, I really feel that the teachers need more support in the classroom. And I feel that I would be able to, could I try that? Because I really believe that relationships are so important. So if we can develop relationships with each other, then we can help each other to grow. And so I took on that role of being the education consultant or education director of the 7 different centers, and I was concerned that the teachers would perceive me as one more supervisor that they had to jump through hoops for, or one more person who had more rules besides the state rules and the QRIS quality rating system rules, that I would be one more person that they had to, stand at attention for, so to speak, okay? And then as I was doing my job, one day I walked into a building, and a teacher came up to me and she said, "When are you coming to my classroom?" So then I knew that I was making a difference for her in the classroom, because she didn't see me as one more supervisor, she saw me as an advocate. And I think that I knew what to do to help them because of my involvement in the association and reading the books and finding out what is high quality, what does a teacher need to do to help them, give them ideas for classroom management, for example. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point when you describe that story, because we know there's so many requests and administrative burdens
Yes.
put on early childhood educators. Can you do that? Can you report
Yes.
on this? Oh, now
Right.
can you do this as well as part of our quality rating program? And all of these
Yes.
things are obviously have good intentions, but it reminds you that there's almost an immediate caution amongst early childhood professionals when there's another individual or another process or another thing that's happening in their role, which goes to show you the benefit of someone who can step in, whether that's an individual or an association that's actually there to help them and relieve some of all this stress and all of these tasks and things that they're required to do in their role, because most of the time it's more burden and more things to do as opposed to empowering and helping them do those things.
Right, and building them up. Exactly. It's more like you said, more things for them to do, not building them up and helping them feel that they're doing well what they're already doing.
Totally.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
What they're doing already is amazing, and then they have to do more, and then I worry that there's no one there saying, you are doing an amazing job.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that you touched on as well is the importance of relationships with each other, and I think that is also very important. Sort of this concept of a community and having other colleagues and peers that you can speak to about about challenges, about things that are working, not working in your classroom. Is that something else that the association can support with?
Absolutely. Looking at Ohio AEYC and looking at NAEYC, the national, or wherever a person is, if they can find an association that does that. Both for Ohio, they have they try to get the voices, have people be heard. We as a board have done a listening campaign so that we call members and we ask them, what are your challenges? What is going well? Where do you wish you were listened more? And NAEYC, actually, they put out a question to the membership throughout the whole United States. And then everyone from any state can respond on what they think. So, for example, the question for this week is, how do you celebrate Father's Day? And then that's given out to the whole United States, and then anyone who wants to can respond, and then everybody reads these ideas, and then they can implement it in the classroom if they want to. So that's one of the reasons that I do like the association, because they have different ways in which members can reach out to each other as well as have their voice heard.
Yeah, and I think that's important, given all the things you've described about the challenges of the role, how much energy it takes to do your job every day as an early childhood educator. So I think it's important to be part of those conversations, and a lot of those are happening online too. So it's great that we can take advantage of that. Now, you know that the Preschool Podcast is one of our passions in starting the podcast is to empower and inspire the future leaders of early childhood education. Do you have any tips or advice to the younger generation starting out careers in early childhood education as it relates to leadership and starting out their career in this field?
Good question, Ron. I would say that I would ask teachers, I would suggest that those starting out in the field, that they be patient with themselves, because I have heard that it can take sometimes 10 years for you to feel really comfortable in your own skin in the classroom. And so a teacher may say, I don't want to do this job, when actually they're still getting their footing. And then secondly, I would encourage them to ask their administrators or their principals, could they observe a master teacher? Someone like, when I first started out, I didn't feel comfortable always with my own classroom management, and I wanted to make sure I was using what was developmentally appropriate in early childhood. So I asked my director, could I observe another toddler teacher who has good classroom management skills? And I think the third thing, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but
No,
I do feel that I wish everyone starting out in the field had an association that had research-based, high quality, but not, college professor PhD language necessarily. So language that is understandable to everyone in the field, that they could use these magazines, these books, the online listening to each other so that they have a support. So I would say, if you go to an area, if you're somewhere where there isn't a support group, then see if you can create one, either online or even at your center. Say, I found this book, this research-based book, if you will, or I found a book on classroom management or a well-known speaker, and I was wondering if other people would like to read the book with me, or listen to a podcast, or watch a speaker, a TED Talk, something that you can, if it's not there, reach out so that you can become the catalyst to be a support to others. And then I think in the end that they will support you. We had a directors network in my Toledo, Ohio area, and at first only a few people came because everyone was suspicious of other directors in early childhood education, because it does have a setup of being competitive. But we kept it going, and it's now been several years, and more directors are coming because they're feeling like this is a safe space where they can be honest with each other about what's really going on in their centers. And I feel that that's the same way for teachers, if they can get to that safe space where they can share with each other, this is really going on in my classroom. Can you give me advice, or where can we go together to look, or what could I read, So I think just listening, being patient, observing another teacher if you're comfortable, and if there is an association that you can join to get that support, join it. It probably has an annual membership fee, but it's worth it. And if there isn't an association, then try to get together with other people at your center or in your city or town where you can sit together. And, we joke that there's a commercial. It talks about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So it's sort of that idea that this is a safe space. We can share what's going on, just to get support for each other.
And it sounds like one of the themes of your advice, which is great advice, by the way, is, to be proactive in reaching out to others
Absolutely.
when it comes to your own career and continuous professional learning. And I think that's excellent advice.
I had to do that myself. If I had waited for me to figure it out through trial and error, or for some magical person to walk in and tell me what I'm doing, everyone else is busy with their own lives, and maybe you're being observed once a year, but you really need to be proactive also, because it stayed in my memory, because I did the work to figure it out and to do the research to find it.
Yeah. And I think that just the concept of taking ownership of your own, your own career and your own professional learning is a very important one. Absolutely. Yeah. And whether that's through informal mentors or relationships you build with other teachers in your community, or through associations and the relationships you build there, I think you can't go wrong with either of those.
Agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, Belinda, it's been a wonderful having you on the podcast. I've learned so much, as I always do doing these. Last question before we wrap up here. If people want to learn more about the Ohio Association for the Education of Young Children, where would they go to get more information?
They would go to www.oaeyc.com.
Wonderful. Belinda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I really appreciated this, Ron. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and leave a review. The Preschool Podcast is brought to you by Hi Mama. If you're anything like the thousands of teachers listening to the Preschool Podcast, you know how long it takes to fill out daily sheets, child portfolios, and lesson plans. And that's where Hi Mama saves the day. With an easy-to-use interface built by teachers for teachers, Hi Mama can cut the time you spend on documentation and parent engagement in half. Create and send beautiful daily sheets, photos, videos, and messages to parents in seconds, saving you time in your busy day. Podcast listeners can get a free tour with one of our community advisors. Go to himama.com and click the